5-year-old African-American National Park Service ranger. She's the oldest ranger in the Park Service system. And where I live, we built 733 Liberty ships in 4 years in the marina there. It was Kaiser Shipyard #2. Mobilized, all of society, and Mr. Kaiser sent trains down through the South and came back and brought, white and black workers and Hispanics and women's, and there's a plaque at the end of the yard there. It's one of the Rosies, a quote from her saying, if not, putting all modesty aside, if not for us, if not for the women, there'd have been no spring of '45. And so we had this total mobilization, and we defeated this threat, and Betty gets up after this very nice film on Rosie, and she was talking to a high school group the first time I met her. She said, it wasn't as good as it seems. That integrated picture wasn't until the end of the war. We didn't fully integrate the yards. I spent most of the war in a segregated union hall, and mostly I was taking index cards, and as workers in the shipyards would change jobs, I'd write it on the index card, and I was 20-something. I was thinking, God, what am I doing? Am I really ending global fascism? She says, well, I guess I really was. And she says, young people today, you got political problems as well, but, you can defeat problems like climate change. And, coming from somebody like Betty, you believe it's true. So it wasn't happening in this election, so I wrote a letter earlier this summer to the candidates on the ocean, sort of, 4 very broad things they could do internationally and nationally. And I got about 115 signatories, everyone from founders of Google to the dean of your school, heads of the aquariums, the National Aquarium, the New England Aquarium, lots of marine labs, the directors of Patty and Dan, and we sent it off, and I've done my due diligence. We never heard back from Trump's people, not even a tweet. But we did get a nice 2-page letter from Hillary in late August, which sort of gives a baseline of what she's committed to. She talks about promoting the blue economy, to have the kind of innovation and economic activity and entrepreneurship that will promote healthy oceans. Talks about the need for continuing policies for sustainable, transparent, and traceable seafood production, and going after pirate fishing and the slave trade is now associated with it, thanks to the work of some good reporters at the Associated Press and Ian Urbina at the New York Times. She talks about the need to pass the Law of the Seas, ratify the Law of the Seas treaty, which is what I would call not even low-lying fruit, but it's sort of been rotting on the Senate floor for the last 30 years. So if the Senate changed, that's another possibility. That's kind of the legal framework that we haven't signed on to, which is the UN's framework for determining rules of scientific exploration, navigation, and territorial claims beyond the exclusive economic zones. And she says we also need to support coastal communities impacted by climate change. So a cautious but a real commitment to extend what we're seeing under the Obama administration. I went to this, John Kerry held Our Ocean conference in DC a couple of weeks, I guess a couple of months ago now, 2 months, and I went there, and this was like the 3rd one he's held. He had 90 nations represented. He got commitments for 44 new marine protected areas around the globe. One nation committed, I think it was Bermuda, committed to stop providing a flag of convenience for the worst aspects and parts of the commercial shipping industry. He said there was $5 billion. I counted about $1.1 billion in commitments for marine conservation. But clearly, I mean, Kerry is best ocean secretary probably since Hamilton, who created the Revenue Cutter Service and the Lighthouse Service. They both, along with the Life-Saving Service, became the modern Coast Guard. And Obama was there, and he spoke like a born-again Hawaiian waterman. I mean, he wasn't so good when BP was destroying the Gulf surface 6 years ago. He treated it like a distraction, but now he's very committed. He was very proud of expanding the Northwest Hawaii. Damn, I remember. who can say it? Okay. Northwest Hawaii National Monument, which is now the largest 5,000 square miles, largest environmentally protected zone on the planet other than Antarctica. You could fit all of our other national parks within its boundaries. He also gave us the first Atlantic Monument. He gave us National Ocean Policy. The Atlantic Monument is the Deep Canyons and Seamounts Monument off New England. It's funny, it was actually a place on 9/11. I was out there with Woods Hole on the Atlantis. We were dropping the Alvin, and we got word that the attacks had happened in New York, and we were too far out. We could only hear it on WINS radio, and so that night they told us to stop dropping the Alvin, because I guess they were putting submarines into those canyons, nuclear subs, to support a carrier battle group that had been stationed off New York. And the Coast Guard Commandant talked with the Chief of Naval Operations. They agreed to put Coast Guard cutters in the rivers and the waters the New York bites, so that they thought that would be less frightening to the public than having the U.S. Navy go in there. But I was just looking at this footage from 8,000 feet down of rat-tailed fish and different critters, and this marine snow, the detritus falling down from above. And finally got word that we're getting the footage. The reception went up to the forecastle, and sort of through the snowy television reception, we saw that footage of the airplanes crashing into the towers, and it just struck me that this is sort of the range of our capability as a species, from exploring and discovering new life in the most remote part of our ocean planet, to bringing death and chaos to our urban heartland. And this is the choices we have. We're sort of nature-made self-conscious, and whether we explore and protect or destroy it all is really still an unknown. But I think the opportunities exist. I think we can turn the tide. I think we have a political moment. If we're going to go to Washington this spring with our 6th Blue Vision Summit to try and bring advocates together, what I call the marine grassroots, I call them the seaweeds, because I found that, when I was writing my first ocean book, the thing that left me somewhat hopeful was finding all these local groups, grassroots groups, doing, planting mangroves, taking pieces of mangrove and replanting them. As middle and high school I visited yesterday, and the Florida Oceanographic Institute, where they're raising bait fish, and so many solutions. Surfrider chapters that I spoke to all the Florida chapters the other day. These surfers who 20 years ago went into the ocean to get their soak and came out with ear infections, gastrointestinal diseases, and as a result they are now leading activists for water quality. They passed a National Beach Act that requires the states to do water quality testing at all recreational beaches, inform the public within 48 hours. And the more you know, the more you tend to act. Number one in my book, 50 Ways to Save the Ocean, is go to the beach, because you protect what you love. So the challenge now is growing the solutions faster than the problems. And I think that's why, along with our summits, we started the Benchley Awards to identify people who are doing that. And there are lots of examples where it's happening. I mean, this is, as I say, you stop killing fish, they tend to grow back. I mean, I've got the story from California, the Golden Shores, how we, like Florida, we started as a late marine frontier. And like a lot of frontiers, the first things we did was, kill indigenous peoples and wildlife. The first, before the gold rush, it was a rush for sea beaver, otter skins, and we wiped out 1 million of these voracious marine weasels and sold their pelts to the royal court in China. And then scammons went after the whales and found that the females and the calves were down in this lagoon in Baja, went in and slaughtered them. And when the whaling didn't work out in California, they went after the northern elephant seal for their oil. And by 1896, there were an estimated 20 to 100 elephant seals left on Guadalupe Island in Baja. So the Smithsonian, these early great scientists, went out there, sent an expedition, they spotted 10 of them, so they shot 7 of them for specimens to take back to the museum. And but over time, as we developed this sort of democracy of blue interest around California, with the Navy and the ports and people living on the coast, we developed a different consciousness, the value of the ocean and of healthy seas. And by the time in 1969 we had the oil spill in Santa Barbara, and it was the same year that the Cuyahoga River caught fire in Cleveland, and sort of had these two images of oiled seabirds and a burning river that helped inspire popular modern environmental movement. And our consciousness changed to the degree that we passed legislation like the Clean Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Act, and in California that we protected the Channel Islands, the breeding and the feeding opportunities. And when we made right decisions, the resiliency of the ocean was amazing. I mean, just like you have the Gulf Stream here in Florida, we have the California current that Barbara Block calls the Serengeti of the ocean, coming down from the Arctic and upwelling zones. And the wildlife began to restore. And in 1990, the first elephant seal hauled up on this one beach that I'm going to visit down in Cambria next week. Go talk there. 1990, the first elephant seal. 1992, the first breeding pair was spotted on this beach by Hearst Castle. And last year, 28,000 elephant seals returned to this one beach to molt and mate. So the possibilities are all there. The problems are all solvable. One of our Benchley winners, Geraldine Atz, is is the first woman, but also the first marine biologist to be named head of a major port of LA. And you go down there, and LA Long Beach is like this land of giants. At 4 in the morning, you have to climb the Jacob's Ladder onto this container ship that's underway coming into the port with the Coast Guard. And I get up there and on the bridge, and the captain's like, "Who the fuck are you?" I go, "Well, I'm a writer. I'm doing a book." He's like, "Nobody told me, but I'm with the Coast Guard here." And so he goes and he gets gets coffee with the coasties and doesn't, ignores me. We come into this port, and it's, like I say, it's got its own AAA map. It's 23 square miles. It's actually two ports, Port of LA and Long Beach. Although you can't tell where one ends and the other begins, but they're still fierce competitors. I was talking to the head of security, and I said, well, it's not just terrorists. What if you have an industrial accident like that ship that exploded in '77 and dozens were killed and like 200 ships had damage? He goes, oh yeah, but that happened in the other port. Didn't happen here. But so Geraldine, the first thing she did is she held the first joint Harbor Commission meeting, LA Long Beach, since 1924, and got them past a Clean Air Action Plan because no new terminal construction was happening because the neighboring communities of San Pedro and Wilmington and Long Beach, they had the highest rates of childhood asthma, the highest rates of cancer in the state. So there were all these lawsuits. Nothing was growing in the port. I wrote it up for Nat Geo. It's like she got a plan. She took 5,000 old diesel burning trucks out of production, replaced them with new vehicles. She did cold ironing where they put electric power on the dock so that these ships no longer burn bunker fuel, the dregs of petroleum in port. They got port electricity. The Southern California Air Quality Board got them to burn cleaner sulfur fuels within 25 miles of the port. One of the results was they moved outside the Channel Islands to try and avoid that, but in doing that, they reduced the number of whale strikes. Within 6 years, air pollution was down 75%. Water quality was already coming back. Where you go in there in the main channel, you see pelicans and sea lions. And because she improved the environment, the lawsuits went away, the port terminals expanded, and this is an example. You're doing right by the air and the water quality, and this is an environment which $1 billion a day of goods cross those docks. So this is really what Hillary Clinton is talking about when she's talking about the blue economy. And Geraldine's, the mayor replaced her, the new mayor, but she's gone on to become the president of the International Association of Ports and Harbors. Now there are 50 major ports around the world that are not just reducing their own emissions, but they've also set up an incentive where any ship that comes in, any container ship that's burning its propulsion systems cleaner than the international IMO standards, gets a 15% reduction on dockage fees. It's going to be huge. You got like a 12,000 TEU ship, that's like $150,000. It's real incentive to start to clean the ocean. And there are all these, ways and means, that we can do it. And the challenge, like I say, is to create the political will that it happens in time. I mean, I don't know, people say, well, you're optimistic, you're pessimistic. It's like I'm not a seer. I don't know if we're going to turn the tide in time to make a difference. All I know is, you know, if we don't try, we lose. And our oceans are just too, you know, exciting, wondrous, adrenaline-fueled, you know, just too sacred to lose. So we keep doing what we do, and we keep, you know, mobilizing. Yesterday I was talking to kids at a couple of schools, you know, 3rd grade through 12th grade, and telling them it's, you know, they're not the leadership of the future. They can be the leadership today, work with adults. And, you know, when we go lobbying and, you know, you get kids with you, it's amazing. And of course I was telling them about parrotfish, you know, how the herbivores are so important. We can't fish them because they graze the, you know, and you can listen to them crunching on the coral, and they're, you know, they're sort of eating the algae, but they're also eating the algae and pooting sand, and, you know, and so all our white sand beaches are really excreted coral poo, and they're like, ooh, ooh, you know, it's like, yeah, and then in his lifetime, one parrotfish can generate 50 cubic yards of sand. So, you know, all these wonders that are out there. Like I say, the challenge is, you know, our new agenda. I was talking with some of you earlier, sort of, Hillary's laid down a baseline. I think she'll live up to it, because the two people who really brought, oceans are never going to be at the level, the policy level of, you know, immigration, education. I just want to take it up to net neutrality. And I think that it's happening, and the two people who had probably the most influence over the last 8 years were John Kerry and John Podesta. And John Podesta has just run her campaign, so if she's the next president, then he'll have some major influence and be a major ally for, you know, for ocean conservation and exploration and science. And, you know, we need to build the budgets up for, you know, agencies like NOAA and the U.S. Coast Guard. And, you know, someday maybe an ocean, you know, a Department of the Oceans for that other, you know, 3.4 million square miles of our exclusive economic zone that's still a largely unregulated wilderness, but also full of promise. Anyway, that's that. Let's just have some questions and then we can discuss. Come on, the 12-year-olds had their hands up right away.
When you talked about the space program getting more dollars,
Yeah.
could somebody lobby or argue that the cost-benefit analysis on spending money to the oceans is far greater, and therefore we should be investing more of our time and resources and tax dollars on the ocean rather than so much of it, you know, in space? And I do understand that the space program is important, especially from a military perspective, because
Sure.
it has developed all sorts of technologies, including the microwave,
Tang.
and so forth. So yes, I understand that the space program is important, but given that there's such an imbalance, and I think that economically we could derive much more benefit by investing research dollars on the ocean, since it's so close to us.
And yeah.
I'm sure that you agree that the money, it's almost like, it's like, hey, we can spend some money and learn how to take care of what we have, or we can find a place to go once we've mucked it up enough.
That was the joke when Bush announced he was going to Mars, and showed he had officially given up on this planet.
But
Yeah, and I think that's.
I don't think the solution is to trash the space.
No, it's not an either or. I mean, especially for people like Kathy Sullivan or Scott Carpenter, it's more like.
Totally the contrary. I think we should. I think we need to put more into the space program and
More into the inner space program. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the argument is why.
Suggesting
Right.
put money into the space program. I'm just saying you could argue that if $10 is being spent on the space program, why aren't we putting $2 or $3 into the NOAA's and the oceanic programs? Because our return on the $2 or $3 is going to be substantial,
More.
whereas the $10 is a very long-term investment, which is also good.
And I think that's why Hillary opened her letter with the blue economy. I think we can frame, make very good arguments that investments in the ocean pay off tremendously. And just we're getting so much in terms of recreation, transportation, trade, energy, protein, just, not to mention our own sort of sense of awe and wonder that the argument to give something back is pretty easy to make. It's just we haven't had the constituency there making the argument until recently. That's why we do our Healthy Ocean Hill Day. I mean, the last one we did, we got, we put down, that was May 13 of 2015. We put down markers. We let, in these meetings, we had 163 meetings, 24 state delegations meeting with their reps, including 9 senators, 26 congressmen, lots of staffers. We said, you're insane on proposing, actually, we said Obama was insane proposing new drilling in the Atlantic, and we actually got, support from some handful of coastal Republicans along with lots of others. And this is something you can mobilize on. I mean, it was very quick. Oceana and Surfrider and lots of groups and lots of local groups like the Small Business Chamber in South Carolina got mobilized. But we also lobbied for an IUU pirate fishing bill, and that passed. And that was like basically half the people, more than half the offices didn't know it existed, didn't know it was bipartisan. The day after we lobbied, the sign-ons for the bill, the sponsors went from 20 to over 40. And when it passed and Obama signed it into legislation, it's like, it's something significant. I mean, as I say, I'm not sure if it's a great example of the ocean being a nonpartisan issue or if it's just that that the bar is now so low that I get really excited when Republicans and Democrats can agree to oppose pirates. But they did, and people went home feeling like they'd gotten something done. And as I was telling everybody earlier, one of the reasons I spent the last 10 days here in Florida is because the Colorado delegation was big. Who would leave their cell phone on at a time like this? I know, I'll just ignore it.
So David, your talk is a little bit depressing, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, so
A little bit hopeful.
But I wonder if you can, when you talk about these things, I mean, we know
it's Craig Pittman, I'm sure. They're playing fun.
I wonder how you change the balance in talking about these things and finding solutions, talking on the positive side and not so much on the negative side.
Well, I'm talking to a room full of adults who are in the field today. I mean, yesterday I was much more positive with the 3rd through 12th grade.
Yeah, I can imagine talking to a 12th grader like you did now. I said, oh, man.
No, I try. Here's my scam. The 12th graders, I talk about what they can do. Below the 4th grade, it's all about the time I, help penguins puke for science. I've learned. I have family. My nephew, when he was in the 4th grade, he